Greetings everyone and welcome to Chilliteracy. Hello, happy Wednesday. How are we all doing? Welcome in all you lovely people. I hope we are well. I hope we are doing all right in this, for the UK at least, very cold weather. So I hope that we can make things cozy and chill for you here tonight. But yes, those of you who have are probably still watching, I assume, the Longest John stream. I hope that's being fun. 1 second, my chair is tied up in my headphone cable. And I nearly threw my headphones off the desk. Going well, doing well. But yes, welcome in, everybody. Welcome in Andy Pants Lynn, Cat Llama, Billiam, nice to see you, and Ray Tracer, and also welcome in, first-time chatter, Elliot Cypher. I assume that's how I pronounce your name. You were waiting, because sometimes it takes us a little while to get things ready on stream, and it's slightly easier for streamers to, give themselves a little bit of time to psych themselves up / prepare, rather than immediately going in live and going, I have nothing sorted out. So that's why. But yes, I hope we are all having good weeks. I hope, hope things are going well for people. I have a selection of spooky stories for you tonight. Was going to be 4, now is 3. Hopefully they are long enough. We shall see. Darly Sam, subscription message. Good Lord, how original of you. You've subscribed for 29 months. Blimey. That's almost a year. We've been doing this for a long time now, haven't we? Read slowly. Yeah, I guess I could try. I'm not very good at reading slowly, though. But yeah, how is everybody? How are we all doing? Sound off in chat. I am cold-ish. Not too bad now, but was cold earlier because it is chilly. Very chilly in the UK today. You're staying warm, Ray Tracer? Good. That is a good thing to be. I'm very glad. Like 1/3 of a metric year. Yes, indeed. Just going to move my mic 1 sec. You are lurking, so you'll reveal nothing. That is fair. Lurk away, Billiam. I hope you have a good lurk. It is nice to see you, as ever. The sun is shining, Ray Tracer, but it's a lie because it's 5 Fahrenheit outside. What's 5 degrees Fahrenheit? Talk in Celsius, please. Oh, excuse me. Freezing rain. Ugh, double plus on good indeed. That's not fun. Freezing rain is rubbish. -15, Ray Tracer. Oof. Okay. That is cold. It's -2 here, yeah. I think it's probably around about the same here. That pales in pales in comparison to -15. Oof. Yes. That be cold. Trade you. No, actually, I think we're all right with our -2. I think we're fine with that. And yeah, freezing rain's never fun. So, excuse me. Why is it that as soon as I start a stream, I start yawning? Shame. Yeah, freezing rain is less fun than snow, so not fun. Would not recommend. I hope you don't get it again for at least a week. But, yeah. 'Tis January, 'tis the season. Sometimes bedtime stories work on your own self. Oh, as in me yawning. Yes, fair enough. It's books are boring, we're all just afraid to admit it. No, books are not boring. Books are never boring. Books are wonderful. But yes. I'm doing it again now. Oh, and I apologise if you can hear a dog barking in the background. For some reason, like, a dog belonging to one of the houses down the road is barking. You've been known to fall asleep while reading to your kids. That's quite impressive. You hope your trees are okay. They're all yours. Trees do not like freezing rain. Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm sure they'll be okay. Trees are fairly resilient. Unless they're, I don't know, particularly fragile trees that don't like cold weather. I don't know. Excuse me. But yes. My brain has ground to a halt. Did I have anything else to say? Oh, for those of you who weren't around last week, we have now opened a Patreon. Whoop whoop whoop. So if you want to go on and support us there, we will be incredibly grateful. We have all of the things that we had on Bandcamp on there, so you can listen to our more professionally recorded bits and bobs over there, which we will be adding to in due course. Yeah. Time zonal greetings to you too, Lady Mephistopheles. Welcome in. Hope you are well. Hope you have been enjoying, I assume, the John's live stream. But yes. It's because so much ice builds up on them. Oh, branches can snap. Excuse me. Yes, yeah, that checks out. And we do need to find some time to plan out more recordings, yes. The start to this year has been a little bit more hectic than I expected. Oh, you found the story! Hey, which one? Good job, Llama. Yeah, we've had a bit of trouble finding some of the stories for tonight in terms of legible format. So yeah, thank you very much if you have found that. We are immensely grateful. We were thinking, actually, we were just discussing earlier that we might do some kind of we might see about doing some kind of sort of like, I guess, sort of blog post type thing on the website, or maybe Patreon, I don't know, of like all of the stories we haven't managed to find, so people can read them. And welcome in, Parola. Hope you are well. And Andy Pants as well. Salutations to you too. Hooray! Found the thing. Huzzah! Was that the first one that I was going to read? It is! I couldn't remember which order I was going to read them in. But, yeah, so we now have a Patreon. Go head over there, should you wish. If you don't, that's fine. Assuming that it is the correct text. I don't know. I'm going to go and have a look. I'm going to click on the thing. Let's have a look. Yes! That is correct. That is the right text. Hooray! Thank you very much, Llama. Your post-TLJ singing stream happy. Well, that's good. I am glad. The other one you were struggling to find was the coat, but oh yeah, A.E.D. Smith. A.E.D. Smith. Whose death date I can't actually find, so I'm assuming it's fine. He might still be in copyright, but I think he was the guy. Yay, Patreon, exactly. Yes, the Patreon link is somewhere. Sam did put it in chat for those of you who like Patreon. Yeah, so I think the chap who wrote The Coat, Mr. Smith, I think he might have been the chap who compiled this book, what I have in my hands, the mammoth book of thrillers, ghosts and mysteries. I think he was the guy who compiled this and therefore has put one of his stories in here. But from what I can find, it seems that he only published his in like periodicals and stuff, so he only really published in like, yeah, newspapers and magazines and things, rather than in book format. So I don't know if that necessarily means it's harder for people to have digital versions of the story. Sam, since it's a pretty tacky thing to do, put a bunch of your own stuff in a compilation you're working on, I know, right? Sam, did you inform Stream Elements to do that? In which case, no. Lucy is absolutely here. Lucy can see that. Excuse me? Stream Elements is autonomous, is it now? Right. You're definitely not in charge of Stream Elements on this channel. You made that months ago. Right. Was that when I was in Germany, perhaps? Great. It's gained sentience, but not necessarily intelligence. Yeah. Great. I've completely forgotten what I was saying now. Yes. But yes, this guy, I can't find when he died. It says unknown. So, yeah. If we're in copyright, then whoops. But, I mean, yeah, I don't know. It should be fine. But yeah, because we're still in. I mean, we're always in Ghost Story Town here. Maybe he's a vampire. Yeah, exactly. He hasn't actually died. We're always sort of in Ghost Story Town here because there are a lot of ghost stories that exist in the world. But also, it's still winter. It's kind of midwinter now, I guess. And therefore, it is time to snuggle up and get cozy and tell ghost stories, as one should at this time of year. Guess their copyright is undying too. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. What would copyright be with vampires? How bleak is this midwinter? I'm not even going to deign to answer that one. Today I learnt, completely off topic. I will get to reading, but I had a mind-blowing moment today whilst doing trumpet practice. That I have a little digital metronome, like little battery powered little metronome. That's I'm showing myself how big it is, but of course you guys can't see. But like, I don't know, maybe a couple of inches across, inch and a bit wide, little rectangle type thing. And it's got like an indent line in the back, a bit like a card reader that has down the side so you can swipe your card. If your card is one of those cards that wants to be swiped. And I've always just thought it's just like just a design thing. And today I realised that it clips onto the music stand. So you can slot it onto like the bottom of the music stand, so you don't have to put it on the music stand so it gets in the way of your music and you have to be constantly moving it. It just sort of hangs on the bottom of the music stand. I have had this metronome for about 10 years. And so I put this on Instagram because I was baffled that I hadn't realised this. And about 7 of my musician friends replied with, "I'm sorry, what?" So I'm so very glad that I wasn't the only one. Because apparently that's a thing. And it doesn't come with any kind of manual. It didn't tell me that was what that was for. You just don't necessarily assume. It doesn't have a clip or anything. And so I was like, oh, well, now I feel like an idiot. So that was my big revelation for the day / week. Yeah. So, cool story time, Lucy. Yeah. So that was the thing I found out today. I just can't believe that I've had this metronome for so flippin' long and haven't realised. Like, it fits perfectly. It's great. And I've never realised. This is madness. Absolute madness. Anyway. Oh, Lama, you're still looking. Well, thank you for looking. Yeah, don't stress too much about it. If we can't find a thing, then it's okay. But thank you for going down the Google rabbit hole for us. We did try and got no luck. That is amazing when you figure out a feature after years. I know, right? It's just like, what? My life would have been so much easier. I mean, not that much easier, but a little bit easier Like, the number of times I have tried to move a metronome on a stand if I've been doing practice with a metronome and, like, pushed the entirety of the music on my stand off. How? So there we go. That's your sort of minor Lucy rant for today, I guess. So yeah, should we actually do some reading? Let's do some reading. Let's read some ghost stories. That seems like an idea. You hate when you figure out really simple things that you should have thought of way earlier, feeling smart and stupid at the same time. I know, because this is the thing. Like this is definitely something I should have found out way earlier. Yeah. Any particular beverages of choice today? Water. that is what I have. I just have water. Very, very exciting, I know. It is working. Hooray! But anyway. Right. So, water is good. Yes, water is good. Water is hydrating and stuff. Want to hear the story, but if you stay to the site, you want to stay till the finish and then you'll be a zombie? Yeah, don't be a zombie. Slightly boost your YouTube views instead. Oh, well, that is always welcome. Go sleep well, go rest well, and enjoy watching the VOD. But yes, we shall begin with tonight's first story. The Man of the Night by Edgar Wallace. The little instrument on the table by the inspector's desk went tick-tock. Then it stopped, as though considering how it should word the message it had to give. It was very still in the charge room, so still that the big clock above the fireplace was audible. That, and the squeaky scratching of the inspector's quill pen as it moved slowly over the yellow paper on the desk before him, were the only sounds in the room. Outside it was raining softly, the streets were deserted, and the lines of lamps stretching east and west emphasized the loneliness. "Tick-tock," said the instrument on the table excitedly. "Tick-tock, tick-tock." The inspector's high stool creaked as he sat up, listening. There was a constable at the door, and he too heard the frantic call. "What's that, Jill?" demanded the inspector testily. The constable came into the charge room with heavy footsteps. "Tickety-tickety-tick-tock," babbled the instrument, and the constable wrote the message. "All stations arrest and detain George Thomas on ticket of leave, aged 35, height 5 foot 8 inches, complexion and hair dark, eyes brown, of gentlemanly appearance. Suspected of being concerned in warehouse robbery. Walthamstow and Canning Town especially note this and acknowledge. S.Y." "In the middle of the night?" exclaimed the inspector despairingly. "They call me up to tell me what I've told them hours and hours ago? What a system!" He nodded his head hopelessly. Outside, in the thin rain, a man was coming along the street, his hands deep in his pockets, his coat collar turned up, his head on his breast. He shuffled along, his boots squelching in the rain, and slackened his pace as he came up to the station. The policeman he expected to find at the door was absent. The man stood uneasily at the foot of the steps, set his teeth, and mounted slowly. He halted again in the passage out of which the charge room opened. "It's a rum thing about Thomas," said the inspector's voice. "I thought he was trying to go straight." "It's his wife, sir," said the constable, and there was a long silence, broken by the loud ticking of the clock. "Then why did his wife give him away?" asked the inspector. "Did she, sir?" There was surprise in the constable's voice, but the man in the passage did not hear that. He was leaning against the painted wall, his hand at his throat, his thin, unshaven face a dirty white, his lips trembling. She gave him away, said the inspector. He spoke with the deliberation of a man enjoying the sensation of dispensing exclusive news. Know her? Slightly, sir, said the policeman's voice. Handsome woman. She might have done better than Thomas. I think she has, said the constable dryly, and they both laughed. That's the reason, is it? Wants to put him under the screw? Well, I've heard of such cases. The man in the passage crept quietly out. He was shaking in every limb. He almost fell at the last step and clutched the railings that bordered the station house to keep himself erect. The rain was pouring down, but he did not notice it. He was shocked, paralysed by his knowledge. He had broken into a warehouse because she had laughed to scorn his attempt at reformation. He had tried to go straight, and she had made him go crooked. And then, when the job was done, with all the old cleverness so that he left no trace of his identity, she had gone straight away to the police and put him away. But that was nothing. Women had done such things before, out of jealousy, in a fit of insane anger at some slight, real or fancied, but she had done it deliberately, wickedly, because she loved some man better than she loved him. He was cool now, seeing things very clearly, and quickened his walk until he was stepping out briskly and lightly, holding his head upright as he had in the days when he was a junior in a broker's office and she had been a novel-reading Miss of Balham. The rain streamed down his face. The cuffs of his thin jacket clung to his wrists. His trousers were soaked from thigh to ankle. He knew a little shop off the commercial road where they sold cheese and butter and wood. He had purchased for a penny a morsel of bread and cheese. He remembered that the woman behind the counter had cut the cheese with a heavy knife, newly whetted and pointed. He thought the matter out as he turned in the direction of the shop. Such knives are usually kept in a drawer next to the till, with the bacon saw and the milk tester, and the little rubber stamp which is used for branding margarine in accordance with the law. He knew the shop would be shuttered, the door locked, and he had no instrument to force an entrance. The kit was in the hands of the police. He had wondered how the Splits had found them. Now he knew. He gulped down a sob. Still, there must be a way. The knife was necessary. He was still weak from his last term of penal servitude. He could not kill her with his hands. She was so strong and beautiful. Oh, so beautiful. Thinking disconnectedly, he came to the shop. It stood in a little side street. There was one street lamp giving light to the thoroughfare. There was no sound but the dismal drip of rain. Nobody in sight. There was a skylight above the shuttered door. It was the only way, he saw that at once. Sometimes these are left unfastened. He stood on tiptoe and felt gingerly along the lower part of the sash. His fingers encountered something that lay on the ledge, and his heart leapt. It was a key. He had guessed this to be a lock-up shop. He knew enough of the casual character of these little shopkeepers not to be surprised at the ease with which an entry might be effected. He slipped the key into the lock, turned it, and stepped in, closing the door behind him softly. The air of the shop was hot and stuffy, full of the pungent scent of foodstuffs, cheese and ham, and the resinous odour of firewood. He had matches in his pocket, but they were sodden and would not strike. He fumbled round the shelves and came upon a packet. He struck a light, guarding the flame with his hand. The shop had been swept and made tidy for the night. The weights were neatly arranged on either side of the scales. There was a piece of muslin laid over the butter on the slate slab. On the counter, conspicuously displayed, was a note. It contained instructions, written in pencil in a large, uneducated hand, to Fred. He was to light the fire, put the kettle on, take in the milk, and serve Mrs. Smith. Fred was the boy, the early comer in the morning, for whom the key had been placed. It was remarkable that he settled all these particulars to his own satisfaction as, lighting match after match, he sought the heavy knife with the sharp point and the newly whetted edge. He even felt a certain exultation in the ease with which he had gained admission to the shop, and had an insane desire to whistle and talk. He found the knife. It was under the counter, with a greatly scarred cutting board and a steel. He wrapped it up carefully in a sheet of newspaper, then remembered he was hungry. He broke off a wedge of cheese. There was no bread, but an open tin of children's biscuits was handy. With the food in his hand, with the knife in his pocket, he continued his exploration. Behind the shop was a little parlour. The door was unlocked, and he entered. He struck match after match, hesitated a moment, then lit the gas. It was a tiny room, cheaply but neatly furnished. There were china ornaments on the mantel-shelf, a few cheap lithographs on the wall, and a loudly ticking clock. There was a clock at the police station. He made a grimace as though he were in pain, felt with his hand for the knife, and smiled. He sat at a little table in the middle of the room and ate the food mechanically, staring hard at the wall ahead of him. He had done everything for her. His first crime, the few sovereigns extracted from the cash box. She had inspired that. Her little follies, her little extravagances, her vanities, these had been at the bottom of every step he had taken. Staring blankly at the wall with wide-opened eyes, he traced his descent. There was a text on the wall. He had been staring at it all this time, an ill-printed text, black and gold, green and vivid crimson, sadly out of register, and bearing in the bottom left-hand corner the conspicuous confession that it was printed in Saxony. His thoughts were elaborate thoughts, but inclined to dive sideways into inconsequent bypaths. Insensibly he had fixed his eyes on the text, in a subconscious attempt to concentrate his thoughts. One half of his brain pursued the deadly course of retrospection, the other half grappled half-heartedly with the words on the wall. He read only those that were in capital letters. Behold, Lamb, God, taketh away sins, world. 3 years penal servitude for burglary, 2 terms of 6 months for breaking and entering. She had been at his elbow. Years ago he was a member of a church, sang in the choir, and religious matters had some significance to him. It is strange how such things drop away from a grown man, how the sweet bloom of faith is rubbed off. He married her at a registry office in Marylebone, and they went to Brighton for their honeymoon. She knew well enough that he could not afford to live as they were living. He had never dreamt that she guessed that he was robbing his employer, and when, coolly and with some amusement, she revealed her knowledge, he was shocked, stunned. Behold, Lamb. Might religion have helped him had he kept closer to its teachings? He wondered, slowly munching his biscuit and cheese, with his eyes on the garish text. He found some milk and drank it. Then he rose. Where he had sat were 2 little pools of water, one on the floor, the other on the table where his arm had rested. He turned out the light, walked softly through the shop, listened, and opened the door gently. There was nobody in sight, and he stepped out, closing and locking the door behind him. He put the key on the ledge where he had found it and went quickly to the main road, the heavy knife, newly whetted and with a sharp point, bumping against his thigh with every step he took. He had an uneasy feeling, and strove to analyse it down to a first cause. He decided it was the text, and smiled. Then, of a sudden, the smile froze on his lips. He was not alone. A man had come from the night, swiftly, silently, and walked with him step for step. He stopped dead. His hand wandered down to the pocket where the knife lay. "What do you want?" he asked harshly. The other made no reply. His face was in the shadow. What clothes he wore, what manner of man he was, Thomas could not say. Only that, standing there, he was tall, gracefully proportioned, easy of movement. There was a silence. Then, "Come," said the man from the night, and the burglar accompanied him without question. They walked in silence, and Thomas observed that the stranger moved in the direction he himself would have taken. "I shall give myself up, afterwards," he said, speaking feverishly fast. "I will end all this. End it, end it." It did not strike him as curious that he should plunge into most secret depths, revealing the innermost thoughts of his heart. He accepted without wonder the conviction that the stranger knew all. "She led me down from step to step, down, down," sobbed Thomas as they walked side by side through the narrow streets that led to the river. "It used to worry me at first, but she strangled my conscience. She laughed at my fears. She is a devil, I tell you." "Other men have said the woman tempted me," said the stranger gently. "Yet a man has thought and will of his own." Thomas shook his head doggedly. "I had no will where she was," he said. "When I have killed her, I shall be a man again." He tapped his pocket. The knife was still there. "If we had children, it might have made a difference, but she hated children." "If you were free of her, you might be a man," said the stranger. His voice was sweet and deep and sad. "Yes, yes!" The other turned on him eagerly. "That is what I mean. She is in my way. If I kill her, I can start all over again, can't I? I could go back and face the world and say, 'I've killed the bad part of me. Give me another chance. Look!'" He fumbled in his pocket and brought forth the knife. The rain came pitter-patter on the paper wrapping, and his hand trembled in his excited eagerness to display the strong blade, with the silvery edge and the needle-like point. "I could not kill her with my hands," he said, breathing quickly, "so I got this knife. I feel I've got to do it, though I hate killing things. I once killed a rabbit when I was a kiddie, and it haunted me for days." "If you were free of her, you might be a man," said the stranger again. "Yes, yes," the thief nodded. "That is what I say. I could go back to the old people." His voice broke. "They don't know how far I've gone under." They turned corner after corner, crossing main thoroughfares, diving through alleys where costers' barrows were stacked, chained wheel to wheel, into mean streets and across patches of waste ground. Once, through a little passage, they came in sight of the river, saw 3 barges moored side by side, rising and falling slowly with the tide. Out in mid-river a steamer lay, 3 lights glimmering feebly. "I shall go into the house from the back," Thomas said. "There's nobody else in the house but an old woman, or there oughtn't to be.
My wife sleeps in the front room."
"If you were free of her, you might be a man," said the stranger.
Yes.
The convict was impatient.
"I know that. When I am free—"
He laughed happily. "She dragged you down to the deeps," said the man of the night softly. "Every step you took for good, she clogged and hindered."
That's right. That is the truth,"
said the other. "Yet you could never escape her. You were loyal and faithful and kind."
"God knows that is true,"
said the man and wept.
"For better or for worse, for richer or poorer,"
he said, and it seemed to him that the stranger was saying these words at the same time. At last they reached a street that was more dark, more wretched than any of its neighbours. The man stopped at a narrow passage which led to the back of the houses.
"I am going in now," he said simply. "You wait for me here, and when I come back we will start our new life all over again. I shall kill her quickly."
The man of the night made no reply, and Thomas went through the passage, turned at right angles along a narrower strip of path between wooden fences, and so came to a rickety back gate. He opened it and went in. He was in a dirty little yard, littered with the jettison of a poor household. There was a tumble-down fowl run, and as he walked stealthily to the house, a cock crew loudly. The back room was empty, as he knew. He pushed up the window. It squeaked a little. He waited for the cock to crow again and mask the sound. Then he swung himself up to the windowsill and entered the room. The point of the knife cut through the thin clothing he wore, and he felt a sharp pain in his leg. He took the knife from his pocket and felt the edge. Then he became conscious of the fact that there was somebody in the room. He gripped the knife tightly and peered through the darkness.
"Who's there?"
he whispered. "It is I," said a voice he knew, the voice of the man of the night.
How did you get in?"
He was amazed and bewildered. "I came with you," said the voice. "Let us free ourselves of this woman. She dragged you down. She is the weed that chokes your soul."
Yes,
Thomas whispered, and reaching out found the stranger's hand. Hand in hand they came to the woman's room. Hand in hand they came to the woman's room. A cheap nightlight was burning on the mantel-shelf. She lay with one bare arm thrown out of bed. Her breast rose and fell regularly. He had seen something else that had risen and fallen monotonously. What was it? Yes, barges on the river. She was handsome in a coarse way, and as she slept, she smiled. Some movement of the man disturbed her, for she stirred and murmured a name. It was not the name of him who stood above her, a knife in his shaking hand. "Do you love her?" The stranger's voice was very soft. The husband shook his head.
"Once I thought so. Now—"
He shook his head again. "Do you hate her?" The thief was looking at the sleeping woman earnestly. "I do not hate her," he said simply. "I served her because it was my duty." "Come," said the stranger, and they left the room together. Thomas unfastened the street door, and they passed again into the dreary night. "I do not love her. I do not hate her," he said again, half to himself. "I went to her because it was my duty. I worked and stole, and she betrayed me, so I thought I would kill her." The knife was still in his hand. In silence they traversed the way they came until they reached a little passage that led to the river. They turned into this. At the end of the passage was a flight of stone steps, and they heard the clug-clug of water as it washed them. Thomas raised his hand and sent the knife spinning into the river, and a voice hailed him from the foot of the steps. "That you, Cole?" His heart almost stopped beating. The voice was hard and metallic. He blinked as though awakened from a sleep. "Was that you, Cole? Who is it?" Thomas saw a boat at the bottom of the steps. There were 4 men in it, and one was holding fast with a boat hook to an iron ring let into the stone. "Me," said the thief. "It ain't Cole," said another voice disgustedly. "Cole won't turn up, he's drunk." There was a whispering in the boat. Then an authoritative voice demanded, "Want a job, my lad?" Thomas went down 2 steps and bent forward. "Yes, I want a job," he said. A querulous voice said something about missing the tide. "Can you cook?" "Yes, I can cook." He had been employed in this capacity in prison. "Jump in. Sign you on tomorrow. We are going to Valparaiso. Steam. How does that suit you?" Thomas was silent. "I don't want to come back here," he said. "We'll get a better man for the return voyage. Jump in." He got into the boat awkwardly, and the officer at the stern gave an order. The boat pushed off, and then the thief remembered the man of the night. He could see him plainer than ever he had seen him before. He was a radiant figure standing on the dark edge of the water, his hands outstretched in farewell. Thomas saw the face, beautiful and benevolent. He saw the faint light that seemed to surround him. "Behold," muttered the man in the boat. "It's strange how that text... Goodbye. Goodbye, sir." "Who are you talking to, mate?" asked the sailor who was rowing. The man who was with me," said Thomas. "There was no man with you," said the sailor scornfully. "You were by yourself." The end. I feel like I've done that one before. Perhaps. Possibly not. I'm not sure. Yes. I think that story is very much trying to say that this is Jesus, but I mean, it could just be a friendly ghost, but or a guardian angel, or that Aziraphale, dude. Oh, that would be great, wouldn't it? Okay, it's canon that this guy is just Aziraphale from Good Omens. Just turns up, it's like, "Now, do you really want to kill her? I don't think that's a particularly good idea. Maybe you should have a cup of tea instead." You accept that canon? Yeah. Aziraphale would definitely do that. Exactly, it's a very Aziraphale thing to do. Yes. Direction AO3, yes. Yeah, that's now canon. Any kind of guardian angel in anything, in any fiction, it's Aziraphale. He's just turning up and doing good things. And sometimes Crowley as well, but we don't talk about that because he's not meant to. Sorry, just got onto Good Omens there. Yes, so I guess I might break a little bit early. We have only 2 more stories after this, so I guess this might be a stream that ends slightly earlier than expected. I did have 4 stories, but yeah, as I say, the first one has a couple of little problems. So decided not to do that one. But yes. I shall send you all to a break. Go have a break. Go do break-related things. And we shall see you back in about 5 minutes. So, yes. Goodbye for now. And I return. Welcome back, everybody. I hope we had a good break. And did break-related things. I hope your chocolate is good, Angeline. And I'm glad it is square-shaped. This is an enterprise to be Googled very carefully. Yes, indeed. Text. I don't know if the text was needed for the other story. I'm not sure. We have 2 more stories. I don't know if Sam managed to find the text for the next one or not. The next one is by Anonymous, so somewhat difficult to Google. But yes, I hope everybody had a good break. I kind of just sat here. Oh dear, have we got some somewhat yeah, careful Googling going on. Thank you, Iceland, for having a museum like that. Maybe not on a work computer. Yeah. Possibly not. Not the best. Not very safe for work. Yeah. But yes. Let me just find my pages for the next story. But I shall wait for people to make their wend their merry way back in. Yes. And maybe not Google, or maybe do Google the Icelandic Phallological Museum. Great. Museum does what it says on the tin. I can imagine. I imagine it does. Thanks, Iceland. I guess it's a thing to have a museum about. Just seeing everybody's reactions to Googling it is like, oh, okay. Right. Everybody's Googling. Oh dear. Angeline, this is all your fault. Or rather your friend's fault. The UK has a vagina museum? Did not know that. Good for the UK. Woo. They have a Tumblr. Of course they have a Tumblr. of all the social medias. Of course they have a Tumblr. Sorry for derailing the spooky reading stream. It's fine. It's an amusing derailment. I'm just gonna... Because I was badly prepared and didn't Google these beforehand. Well, didn't find the texts. Let me just quickly... If I could spell. There we go. Copy. And the paste. What have you come back to, Sam? I don't know. No idea. Perfectly normal museum talk. Yeah. Lucy says she's Googling text. Well, I did. Look, I've got proof. That is what I did. It's educational. Yeah, I was not Googling that. Different site to the one you found? Oh, you found more. Oh, get you. That was just the first one I saw. Feel free to put yours up if you so wish. If it's, I don't know, laid out a bit better. That was just a PDF, I think. But if we are all sitting comfortably and somewhat... Yours isn't a PDF. Well, there we go. I guess do that one then. Feel free to pin, or I shall pin. There you go. Yes, if we're all sitting comfortably and are sufficiently traumatised by Googling things, then we shall continue with our next story of tonight, which is A Tale of a Gaslight Ghost by Anonymous. 'Tis an easy thing for me to tell you a story of ghosts,
For from my childhood I have been accustomed to hear of them. From my infancy I was taught to believe in them. Not the old nurses' tales of white-draped spectres, of grinning skulls and ghastly goblins, but the well-authenticated appearances after death of those known upon earth in the dress they wore when toiling in the world. Ghosts ran in the Dale family, people said jeeringly. Insanity too, they added, and from time to time we have been made the butts of jokes for those would-be wags who refuse to believe anything which does not happen to have come under their own narrow experience. I could tell you a story of my great-grandfather, who was haunted by the spirit of a man he slew in a duel, who followed him in the spirit form wherever he went, beckoning to him from the midst of a crowd at times, at others visiting him in the solitude of his chamber, till my great-grandfather, driven to frenzy, one day drew his sword and nearly ran his butler through the body for denying the ghost of the murdered man stood by him. The constant terror of this continual appearance drove my ancestor out of his mind, though, of course, there were people who declared he was out of his mind in the first instance. So of Roderick Dale, his son, who was haunted by an unknown figure and finished his days in a lunatic asylum. So of Charles Mervyn, his nephew, who was again and again surprised by the apparition of his father, starting, as it were, from out the wall upon him. I could tell you all these stories, but you would not even pretend to listen to them. The story I am about to tell you is quite different from these. It happened less than 2 years ago. There are a dozen men alive at the present day to vouch for its truth, and it does not depend on any of the usual ghost properties for its effect. In it there is no dismal ruined mansion, no desolate churchyard, no bell tolling the hour of midnight, no rattling of chains or hollow groanings. In short, it is a matter-of-fact ghost story, with none of the ordinary paraphernalia generally supposed to appertain to the spirit world. In order, however, that you may understand it properly, I must give you a short description of the parish of Mapleton, and a few of its inhabitants some 20 months since. Mapleton is an essentially agricultural parish. Its acreage is large, and so are its tillers. Its population is small, and so are its wants. Its politics are conservative, its society is exclusive, and its ignorance of the other parts of the world is great. Furthermore, its landowners are few and wealthy, and its tenant farmers well-to-do and contented. It was on record that only one farmer had ever been dissatisfied with the state of things at Mapleton, a young man who had considered the old house in which generations of his ancestors had been born and died too gloomy for him, and had built himself a brand new house, of a mixture of the cottage and villa style, on the outskirts of the village, and had immediately afterwards gone to the dogs, and had been forced to seek a living away from his native place. Thus it came about that there was a house to let in Mapleton. But how Gregory Barnstake came to know of it, and how, knowing it, he came to take it, after it had remained empty several years, was never understood. Where he came from, nobody knew. Who he was, no one could find out. He was a severely handsome man, by which I mean that his face in marble would have been called superb, but in flesh and blood it was too hard and too expressionless. He was neither young nor old. He had no friends who came to see him, and he appeared to be well off. Society at Mapleton settled that from such a man it would be well to keep aloof until something was known of his antecedents, but Gregory Barnstake never gave society an opportunity of showing its feelings, for he avoided as much as possible even necessary intercourse with his neighbours,
and, as the villagers put it, kept himself to himself. The doctor was the only man in the parish who had ever entered his house. Gregory Barnstake one afternoon fell down in a fit, and his servant ran to Dr. Sweetman and brought him in all haste to where the new inhabitant of Mapleton lay stretched on a couch, with his limbs cold and stiff, and his eyes fixed and glassy, looking more like a corpse than a man. In an hour's time the rigidity left his limbs, and his eyes assumed their ordinary expression. Sitting up, his glance rested somewhat angrily on the doctor. "Who are you?" he asked abruptly. "Dr. Sweetman. I heard from your servant that you were ill, and came to see if I could be of any service." "Thank you. When I want physic, I will send for you." The doctor, who was as merry and good-natured a little round man as you could wish to meet with, took this, of course, as a dismissal, and not a very polite one. He was not prone to take offence, but he could not feel pleased with such a reception. "Good day, sir," he said, opening the door. "Stay a moment, doctor, I beg," said Mr. Barnstake. "I fear I have offended you. Let me explain to you that these fits of mine come upon me at intervals. I can never tell when to expect them. They seize me and leave me in a state of torpor for 1, 2, or sometimes 3 hours, during which time no doctor's skill could benefit me. When they have passed, I recover at once, as you see I have done now." "Is your mind unconscious at the time?" asked Dr. Sweetman. "Unconscious of the present, but living in the past," was the answer with a weary sigh. "Have you any pain when you are attacked in the first instance?" "Yes. I feel as if a hand of ice were laid over my heart. Then that its hold tightens, causing me exquisite pain, till at last I fall senseless." Said the doctor. "A curious but not an unprecedented case. If you would allow me to send you something, I fancy I could alleviate your sufferings." "Quite a mistake. You doctors go on prescribing medicine till you believe in their efficacy." "You have a bad opinion of the profession," responded the doctor. "Not of the profession so much, perhaps, of those who practice it. The world is composed of knaves and fools. The fools take the medicines, the knaves prescribe." Retorted the doctor hotly. "Then, sir, I am to conclude that you alone are superior to the world at large, as you are neither knave enough to prescribe, nor fool enough to take prescriptions." "You are to conclude nothing of the sort, but to see in me an unfortunate man whose love of playing the knave led him on to play the fool, and reduced him to what he now is. If you knew the story of my life, you—" "Well, sir?" "You would know the story of a miserable man." The doctor had to be content with that ending to the sentence, and took his leave, puzzling his head to make out whether he had been talking to a man whose brains were a little touched, or whether his conversation had been with one of those dark and mysterious heroes so often met with in books and melodramas, but so seldom in real life. The months went by at Mapleton. The crops were gathered in and sown again, and Gregory Barnstake remained as great a mystery as ever. With the doctor he had had on 1 or 2 occasions short conversations, but with no one else had he interchanged more than a few words of abrupt courtesy. A time came, however, when he was driven to consort with his neighbours. An enterprising railway company, having discovered there was no iron road near Mapleton, sent out its staff of surveyors to walk over the farms and inspect the country, with a view to making a branch line from Overbury through Mapleton to Harston Heath, and the landowners rose in a body to repel the intrusive steam engines. Gregory Barnstake received a letter to inform him of these facts, and at a meeting
commencing with a dinner, was to be held at the Seven Stars on a certain day for the purpose of remonstrating, petitioning, and doing anything that might be necessary to stop the proposed railway. To this letter he returned no answer. A second was sent, repeating the substance of the first, and adding the information that his house was the proposed site of the station. To this he rejoined that he was sorry to hear it, as he should certainly leave the place in the event of a railroad coming there, but that at the same time he must decline to attend the dinner. However, still further pressure was put upon him, till at last, in an interview with Dr. Sweetman, he said angrily, "Well, well, to save further words I will attend, but bear in mind, whatever may happen, I am not responsible." There were many reasons why his presence was so much desired at the meeting, the principal being that he was a person much interested, as the whole of the land he held on lease would be required by the railway company. Another, that it was whispered that he was very clever, that he read Latin and Greek books for amusement, and that mysterious volumes of matter incomprehensible save to the learned lay generally on the table by his side. Now, the Mapletonians, as a rule, knew more of farming than of literature, and it was deemed that to have a man amongst them who would polish up any petition they might send forward, and to see the correctness of expression in such letters as they might consider it incumbent on them to write, would be of the greatest advantage. And so it was that Gregory Barnstake was worried into a reluctant assent to attend the meeting. The day, big with fate for the Mapletonians, arrived. The landowners and the majority of tenant farmers met in the largest room of the Seven Stars, and, punctual to the minute, Gregory Barnstake entered. As the door opened to give him admission, he happened to be the subject of the conversation, and an awkward silence ensued as he came forward. But one or two speedily advanced towards him and gave him a hearty welcome, thanking him for breaking through his rule of never mixing with his neighbours, and hoping that, now he had commenced, they might often have the pleasure of seeing him, to all of which he answered, gravely and seriously, that it was no pleasure to him to mix in what was called society, but as they had pressed him so much to be present on this occasion, he had felt he must do as they desired. "But," he added, speaking loudly enough for the whole room to hear, "in accepting your invitation, I omitted to state that it would be impossible for me to come alone, and therefore I must beg that a chair may be set apart for another guest." Everyone was astonished, for never had Gregory Barnstake been seen talking familiarly with anyone. Never had he been supposed to have any intimate, and yet there was someone from whom he could not be separated himself even for a few hours. "Is your friend in any way interested in this proposed railway encroachment?" asked the squire. "Not in the least." "Has he any property about here?" "None whatever." We have not expected anyone here today," stammered the squire, getting very red in the face, "who was not in some way connected or, at all events, interested in the subject we have met to discuss, but, of course—" "If you have any objection, I will at once withdraw." No, on no account. I was about to add that any friend of yours we would accept." There was a silence, then a short desultory conversation, and in the middle of it dinner was announced. "Has your friend arrived?" asked the squire of his strange acquaintance. "I see no unfamiliar face amongst us." "He is not here yet, but he is sure to come. If I may keep this seat next to me vacant for him, it is all I require." No objection was made. The party took their seats, leaving that one chair unoccupied. The covers were removed, and the dinner commenced. There was not much conversation then, for the Mapletonians held that to dine was one of the chief duties of man. But ere the first course was at an end, the entire party, with one accord, raised their eyes from their plates and fixed them on a figure sitting in the chair that had been left vacant. Gregory Barnstake alone seemed quiet and unsurprised. In the chair by his side sat a man, remarkable more for his aristocratic appearance than for any beauty of feature. His age, apparently, was between 40 and 50. His hair and whiskers were iron grey, and arranged with scrupulous neatness and precision. But the most extraordinary thing about him was his complexion, which was of a pale ash hue, such as to cause more than one to shudder and wonder. Another peculiarity about him was his attire. He was in full evening dress. His black coat and spotless shirt front, his sparkling studs and snowy cravat, contrasted strangely with the farmer's shooting jackets and the squire's bird's-eye neckerchief. Quietly he sat at table, eating nothing, but trifling with the fork laid beside his plate. No one had seen him enter. No one had observed him take his seat. But there he sat, as calmly and unconcernedly as if he were a bidden guest, known to the whole company. As he played with the fork with his left hand, another fact was apparent, which was that the second and third fingers on that hand were wanting. It was strange that, while the whole table paused to regard the stranger, the only person who seemed unconscious of his presence was he who sat by his side, and through whose agency he was in the room. There was a great awkwardness about it, the squire thought, for Gregory Barnstake had apparently no intention of introducing him, and not one of the company seated in that warm, gas-lighted room, with a good dinner on the table before them, but felt a sensation of uneasiness, for which they were totally unable to account. "Come, gentlemen," said the squire, feeling it incumbent upon someone to break the silence. "There's no occasion for so much solemnity, I hope. Mr. Parkhurst, pleasure of a glass of wine with you." Mr. Parkhurst filled his glass. "Ah," continued the squire, "I remember old Tony buying this wine. Very good it is too. Let me see, when was it? 44, I think."
"No," said the stranger. 48.
"I beg your pardon, sir. Did you know Tony Bean?"
The stranger shook his head.
"Anyhow, it was in the year Jem Hales was transported for poaching. His time's up now. He'll be coming home soon, I suppose."
"Jem Hales will never come home," said the stranger.
"Do you know him, then?"
"I saw him a short time since."
"Indeed? In England?"
"No."
"Where is he now?"
"In his grave." The squire gazed, not without a certain amount of fear, on the uninvited guest, and pursued the matter no further. I sneeze, one sec. Excuse me. The conversation at the dinner table languished, and, in spite of one or two attempts to revive it, finally died into confidential whisperings between those sitting next to each other. With the removal of the cloth, the spirits of the company revived, and the squire, getting on his legs, inveighed with all the eloquence of which he was master against all the railway companies, and that one in particular which threatened to destroy the primitive innocence of Mapleton. Everybody spoke at once, and the meeting had like to have proved a failure, but Gregory Barnstake, rousing himself, made a speech such as never had been heard in Mapleton, putting all the facts before them clearly and concisely, and urging the immediate drawing up and signing of the proposed petition. All this time the stranger sat calm and immovable, but when preparations were being made for framing the petition, he spoke. "You may spare yourself trouble,"
he said.
Your petition will be of no avail.
How do you know that? Asked the squire sharply.
I state a fact.
Perhaps you are a shareholder in the company, said the farmer, in a tone meant to be sarcastic.
This day 19 months, said the stranger, a train will pass through Mapleton.
I hope you are a false prophet, sir, said the squire.
I am not, rejoined the other. In spite of his prediction, the petition was drawn up and signed, and the meeting broke up.
You see, we persevere in our plan, although you predict failure, said the squire, putting on his hat.
The stranger bowed.
Good evening, sir.
We shall meet again. In 8 weeks.
You are certainly a very circumstantial prophet, answered the squire,
and with a slight bow he left the room.
Said Dr. Sweetman, taking Gregory Barnstake by the button, An extraordinary-looking man, your friend.
Very.
Excuse me, I don't wish to be impertinent, but in the interest of my profession, do you know if he is suffering from any internal disease?
He is not. I can answer for it, said Gregory with a slight shudder.
It is strange. I never saw a living man with such a complexion.
He is not a living man, was the reply, and the speaker walked away, leaving the little doctor gazing after him in frightened astonishment. 8 weeks after this dinner, the squire was out with the hounds, and his horse, in taking a hedge, stumbled and pitched his rider over his head. The squire was not hurt, neither was the horse, for he trotted away, leaving his owner to follow as best he might, and over fields and hedges he went, till, on emerging from a small copse, he saw his steed standing by a pond, and near to him the figure of a man. The man was dressed in spotless evening attire, and was without a hat, and the squire in a moment identified him as the stranger at the dinner 2 months before. His appearance had been singular enough within the walls of the 7 Stars, but now to meet him in a precisely similar dress in the open country was much more startling, and the squire, though a brave man, would have avoided him if possible. He would have given a well-filled purse to have been able to reach his horse without passing by the motionless figure, but it was an impossibility. So, raising his hat and putting as bold a face on it as he could, he thanked the stranger for catching his beast, but received not a syllable in response. Only, at last, when he had remounted his horse, did the figure move, and then it turned towards him, and, stretching out the hand on which the 2 fingers were missing, pointed to the water. The squire set spurs to his horse and rode away. The days became weeks, and the weeks months. The railway company got permission to make their line through Mapleton, and some 100 navvies were busily employed in making an embankment. In draining the pond which was memorable to the squire, they found something which induced them to leave off work for the time, and send for the authorities to the spot. And that something was the skeleton of a man half buried in the mud. Dr. Sweetman was, of course, amongst those summoned. The bones were left untouched for his inspection.
"It's strange," he said when he had finished his inspection, "but there are 2 fingers wanting."
There was nothing to be done after the inquiry but to place the bones in a coffin and inter them in the churchyard, but an idea had come into the doctor's head, a fancy that Gregory Barnstake might know something of the skeleton. Had not that mysterious friend of his lacked 2 fingers of his left hand? So the doctor, on his way home, called at the house at the end of the village.
He rapped at the door with his knuckles, but received no answer. The door was on the latch, and he pushed it open. He entered the sitting room where he had had his first interview with its strange occupant, and the first thing that met his eyes was Gregory Barnstake stretched on the floor, his handsome face terribly distorted with pain. Dead. Was he really dead? Or was it only one of those strange fits to which he was subject? The little doctor tried every test, and decided it was really death that had come upon him, that the agony of one of those fits had killed him. For the rest, I hardly dare tell you, but nevertheless it is true that when the body came to be examined, over the heart were distinctly discernible the livid marks as of a hand pressed tightly there, but of a hand of which the second and third fingers were wanting. That is the story I had to tell you. You are welcome to put what interpretation on it you please. It was a mystery, and a mystery it will always remain. I cannot attempt to give you a clue to one of the strangest stories it has ever been my lot to hear and know to be true. In conclusion, I can only add that there are now at least a dozen men alive who can vouch for the accuracy of the facts I have stated, but who, like myself, whatever may be their opinions, forbear to attempt an explanation of this strange occurrence, to which I, perhaps without sufficient reason, have given the name of the Tale of a Gaslight Ghost. Mrs. Maberly's story produced very different impressions of the various hearers. For a while upon some it had the effect of making them shudder and look fearfully and uneasily around. Others had, with difficulty, concealed the smile which curled their lips as the climax drew near. "It's too horrible, my dear," said Mrs. Merrifield. "I shall dream of that three-fingered man, I'm sure." "Oh, Meggie, Meggie," said Mrs. Featherstone, laughing gaily. "Can anyone believe such nonsense? A ghost with a dress coat and patent leather boots? Oh, don't be angry, but I can't help laughing." "It seems to me," said Miss Macgregor oracularly, "that it is more a subject for sorrow than merriment to think that, after all the opinions given by eminent man against the supernatural theory, persons should be found still to believe in it." "But," urged Mrs. Maberly, "how are we to disbelieve the evidence of our senses? If I saw a ghost, I would rather believe my own eyes than a clever man's words." "Mrs. Maberly, there are no such things as ghosts." As the single lady said this in a low laugh, coming no one knew whence, as the single lady said this, a low laugh, coming no one knew whence, sounded in the room, and the married ladies looked at one another in alarm. "What was that? Where did it come from? Did you hear it?" asked one of the other in frightened whispers. "It was the wind whistling through the keyhole," replied the spinster triumphantly. "See even now how the candles flicker. It was nothing but wind, like all ghost stories." The end. I hope you enjoyed that one. I quite like that one. I like the little addition at the end of, it's just the wind. Just the wind. That's all ghost stories are. But yes, I quite like the whole, this guy had a handprint that had squeezed his heart. That's, it's nice and grim. My version went on farther than either of the texts posted. Yeah, there was just that little extra bit at the end. I'm not entirely sure why that was there. Bonus postscript, yeah. Yeah, not sure why, but I quite liked it. Having a little sort of, I've told my story and now everybody's reactions. But yeah,
I quite enjoyed that one. Bloody railway companies ruining the countryside with their railways and things. But right, I have one more story for you tonight. I don't know who has links for this. This is the one that was most difficult to find, I think, because it's by a chap called A.E.D. Smith, which is just like, what? Well, just use your name, mate. Stop using just letters. So we do have one. Terrible SEO, yeah. Oh, excuse me. Oh. I do apologise. But yes, let us continue with the last story for tonight. I think this is literally the book you're reading from. Yeah, well I think this guy is the chap who compiled this, so I think this might be the only book that this is published in, possibly. So, yeah. But anyway, if we are all still sitting comfortably, let us continue with The Coat by A.E.D. Smith. I am quite aware that the other fellows in the office regard me as something of an oddity, as being a rather queer bird, in fact. Well, of course, a man who happens to be of a studious disposition, who dislikes noise and prefers his own company to that of empty-headed companions, and who, moreover, is compelled by defective vision to wear thick glasses, is always liable to be thus misjudged by inferior minds, and ordinarily I treat the opinion of my colleagues with the contempt it deserves. But at this particular moment I was beginning to think that, perhaps, after all, there might be something to be said for their view. For, though I might still repudiate the queer bird part of the business, undoubtedly I was an ass, a first-class chump. Otherwise I should have been spending my holidays in a nice, comfortable way with the rest of the normal world, listening to the Pierrots or winking at the girls on the promenade of some seaside resort at home, instead of having elected to set out alone on this idiotic push-bike tour of a little-known part of France. Drenched, hungry, and lost, a stranger in a strange land, dispiritedly pushing before me a heavily laden bicycle with a gashed tyre. Such was the present result of my asinine choice. The storm had overtaken me miles from anywhere, on a wild road over a spur of the Vosges, and for nearly 2 hours I had trudged through the pelting rain without encountering a living soul or the least sign of human habitation. And then, at long last, rounding a bend, I glimpsed just ahead of me the chimney-pots and gables of a fair-sized house. It was a lonely, desolate-looking place standing amid a clump of trees a little way back from the road, and somehow, even at a distance, did not convey a very inviting impression. Nevertheless, in that wilderness it was a welcome enough sight, and in the hope of finding temporary shelter and possibly a little badly needed refreshment, I quickened my pace towards it. 200 yards brought me to the entrance gates, and here I suffered a grievous disappointment, for the roofless porter's lodge, the dilapidated old gates hanging askew on their hinges, and the overgrown drive beyond, plainly indicated that the place was no longer inhabited. I speedily comforted myself, however, with the reflection that in the circumstances even a deserted house was not to be despised as a refuge. Once under cover of some kind, I might make shift to wring out my drenched clothing and repair my damaged mount, and without further ado I pushed my bicycle up the long-neglected drive and reached the terrace in front of the house itself. It proved to be an old chateau, half smothered in creepers and vines that had long gone wild, and, judging by the carved stone coat of arms over the main entrance, had once been occupied by a person of some quality. Mounted on a pedestal on either side of the iron-studded front door stood a rusty carronade,
Trophies, probably, of some long-forgotten war in which the former occupier had played a part. Most of the windows had been boarded up, and it was evident that the place had stood empty for many years. I tried the front door. To my surprise, it was unfastened, and a thrust of my shoulder sent it creaking grudgingly back on its hinges. My nostrils, as I stepped into the dim, wide hall, were at once assailed by the stale, disagreeable odour of rotting woodwork and mouldy hangings and carpets. For a moment or two I stood peering uncertainly about me, with the slight feeling of eeriness that one usually experiences when entering an old, empty house. Facing me was a broad staircase with a long, stained-glass window, almost opaque with dirt and cobwebs, at its head. I mounted the stairs, and throwing open the first door at hand, found myself looking into a spacious, handsomely furnished room that had evidently once been the chief apartment of the house, though long neglect and disuse had now reduced it to a sorry state. The ornate cornice hung here and there in strips, and in one corner the plaster of the ceiling had come down altogether. Green mould covered the 18th century furniture. Curtains and draperies hung in tatters, and one half of the beautiful old Persian carpet, from a point near the door right across to the fireplace, was overspread by an evil-smelling bright orange fungus. The fireplace gave me an idea. Could I but find fuel, I might light a fire, make myself a hot drink, and get my clothes properly dried. A little searching in the outbuildings discovered a sufficient quantity of old sticks to serve my purpose, and with a bundle of them under my coat, I re-entered the house and briskly made my way upstairs again. But on the threshold of the big room, without quite knowing why, I suddenly checked. It was as though my legs, of their own volition, had all at once become reluctant to carry me further into the apartment, as if something quite outside of me were urging me to turn about and retreat. I laid the sticks down at my feet, and for a moment or two stood there uncertainly in the doorway. I was beginning to sense some subtle suggestion of danger in the atmosphere of the place. Everything was apparently just as I had left it, yet I had an uneasy sort of feeling that during my brief absence something evil had entered that room and left it again. I am neither a nervous nor a superstitious person, yet I found myself a moment later rather shamefacedly picking up my sticks and moving back towards the head of the stairs. Actually, it was not so much fear as a vague precautionary sense of uneasiness that prompted me. It had occurred to me that perhaps I might feel more comfortable if I remained nearer to the front door and made my fire in one of the rooms on the ground floor. If it was an idiotic fancy, I know, but, well, if anything queer did happen, and I had to make a sudden bolt for it, I could get out quicker that way. It was on this second descent of the stairs, as I faced the light from the open front door, that I suddenly noticed something that pulled me up with a decided start. Running up the centre of the staircase, and quite fresh in the thick dust, was a broad, broken sort of track, exactly as though someone had recently trailed up an empty sack or something of that nature. From the foot of the staircase I traced this track across the hall to a spot immediately below an old, moth-eaten coat that hung from one of a row of coat pegs on the opposite wall. And then I saw that similar tracks traversed the hall in various directions, some terminating before the doors on either side, others leading past the foot of the stairs to the rear regions of the house, but all seeming to radiate from the same point below the coat pegs. And the queerest thing about it all was that of footprints other than my own, there was not a sign. Uneasiness once more assailed me. The house appeared to be uninhabited, and yet, plainly, someone, or something, had recently been in the place. Who or what was the restless, questing creature that had made those strange tracks to and from the old cote? Was it some half-witted vagrant? That woman, possibly, whose trailing draperies obliterated her own footprints? I had a closer look at the old garment. It was a military greatcoat of ancient pattern, with 1 or 2 tarnished silver buttons still attached to it, and had evidently seen much service. Turning it round on its peg with a gingerly finger and thumb, I discovered that just below the left shoulder, there was a round hole as big as a penny, surrounded by an area of scorched and stained cloth, as though a heavy pistol had been fired into it at point-blank range. If a pistol bullet had indeed made that hole, then obviously the old coat at one period of its existence had clothed a dead man. A sudden repugnance for the thing overcame me, and with a slight shudder I let go of it. It may have been fancy or not, but all at once it seemed to me that there was more than an odour of mould and rotting cloth emanating from the thing. There was a taint of putrefying flesh and bone. A taint of animal corruption, faint but unmistakable. I could sniff it in the air, and with it something less definable but no less real, a sort of sixth sense feeling that the whole atmosphere of the place was slowly becoming charged with evil emanations from a black and shameful past. With an effort I pulled myself together. After all, what was there to be scared about? I had no need to fear human marauders, for in my hip pocket I carried a small but serviceable automatic. And as for ghosts, well, if such existed, they didn't usually walk in the daytime. The place certainly felt creepy, and I shouldn't have cared to spend the night there, but it would be ridiculous to allow mere idle fancies to drive me out again into that beastly rain before I'd made myself that badly needed hot drink and mended my bicycle. I therefore opened the door nearest to me, and entered a smallish room that apparently had once been used as a study. The fireplace was on the side opposite to the door, and the wide ancient grate was still choked with the ashes of the last log consumed there. I picked up the poker, a cumbersome old thing with a knob as big as an orange, raked out the ashes, and laid my sticks in approved Boy Scout fashion. But the wood was damp, and after I had used up half my matches, refused to do more than smoulder, whilst a backdraft from the chimney filled the room with smoke. In desperation I went down on my hands and knees and tried to rouse the embers into flame by blowing on them. And in the middle of this irksome operation, I was startled by a sound of movement in the hall, a single soft flop, as though someone had flung down a garment. I was on my feet in a flash, listening with every nerve ataut. No further sound came, and, automatic in hand, I tiptoed to the door. There was nothing in the hall, nothing to be heard at all save the steady swish of the rain outside. But from a spot on the floor directly below the old coat, the dust was rising in a little eddying cloud, as though it had just been disturbed. "Pah! A rat!" I told myself, and went back to my task. More vigorous blowing on the embers, more raking and poking, more striking of matches, and, in the midst of it, again came that curious noise. Not very loud, but plain and unmistakable. Once more I went into the hall, and once more, except for another little cloud of dust rising from precisely the same spot as before, there was nothing to be seen. But that sixth sense warning of imminent danger was becoming more insistent. I had the feeling now that I was no longer alone in the old, empty hall, that some unclean, invisible presence was lurking there, tainting the very air with its foulness. "It's no use," I said to myself. "That I may be a nervous fool, but I can't stand any more of this. I'll collect my traps and clear out whilst the going's good." With this, I went back into the room, and keeping a nervous eye cocked on the door, began with rather panicky haste to repack my haversack. And just as I was in the act of tightening the last strap, there came from the hall a low, evil chuckle, followed by the sound of stealthy movement. I whipped out my weapon and stood where I was in the middle of the floor, facing the door with my blood turning to ice. Through the chink between the door hinges, I saw a shadow pass. Then the door creaked a little, slowly began to open, and round it there came the coat. It stood there, upright in the doorway, as God is above me, swaying a little as though uncertain of its balance, collar and shoulders extended as though by an invisible wearer, the old, musty coat I had seen hanging in the hall. For a space that seemed like an eternity, I stood like a man of stone, facing the thing as it seemed to pause on the threshold. A dreadful sort of hypnotism held me rooted to the spot on which I stood. A hypnotism that completely paralysed my body and caused the pistol to slip from my nerveless fingers, and yet left my brain clear. Mingled with my frozen terror was a feeling of deadly nausea. I knew that I was in the presence of ultimate evil, that the very aura of the hell-engendered thing reared there in the doorway was contamination, that its actual touch would mean not only the instant destruction of my body, but the everlasting damnation of my soul. And now it was coming into the room, with an indescribable bobbing sort of motion, the empty sleeves jerking grotesquely at its sides, the skirts flopping and trailing in the dust, was slowly coming towards me, and step by step, with my bulging eyes riveted in awful fascination on the thing, I was recoiling before it. Step by step, with the rigid, unconscious movement of an automaton, I drew back until I was brought up with my back pressed into the fireplace and could retreat no further. And still, with deadly, malevolent purpose, the thing crept towards me. The empty sleeves were rising and shakily reaching out towards my throat. In another moment they would touch me, and then I knew with the most dreadful certainty that my reason would snap. A coherent thought somehow came into my burning brain, something that I had read or heard of long ago. The power, the holy sign against the forces of evil? With a last desperate effort of will, I stretched out a palsied finger and made the sign of the cross. And in that instant, my other hand, scrabbling frenziedly at the wall behind me, came into contact with something cold and hard and round. It was the knob of the old, heavy poker. The touch of the cold iron seemed to give me instant repossession of my faculties. With lightning swiftness, I swung up the heavy poker and struck with all my force at the nightmare horror before me. And lo! On the instant, the thing collapsed and became an old coat, nothing more, lying there in a heap at my feet. Yet, on my oath, as I cleared the hellish thing in a flying leap and fled from the room, I saw it, out of the tail of my eye, gathering itself together and making shape, as it were to scramble after me. Once outside that accursed house, I ran as never man ran before, and I remember nothing more until I found myself, half fainting, before the door of a little inn. Bring wine in the name of God, I cried, staggering inside. Wine was brought, and a little wondering group stood round me while I drank. I tried to explain to them in my bad French. They continued to regard me with puzzled looks. At length a look of understanding came into the landlord's face. "Mon Dieu!" he gasped. "Is it possible that Monsieur has been in that place? Quick, Juliette, Monsieur will need another bottle of wine." Later, I got something of the story from the landlord, though he was by no means eager to tell it. The deserted house had once been occupied by a retired officer of the First Napoleon's army, a semi-madman with a strain of African blood in him. Judging from the landlord's story, he must have been one of the worst men that God ever allowed to walk the earth. "Most certainly, monsieur, he was a bad man, that one," concluded my host. "He killed his wife and tortured every living thing he could lay his hands on, even, it is said, his own daughters. In the end, one of them shot him in the back. The old chateau has an evil name. If you offered 1,000,000 francs, you would not get one of our country folks to go near the place." As I said in the beginning, I know that the other fellows in the office are inclined, as it is, to regard me as being a bit queer, so I haven't told any of them this story. Nevertheless, it's perfectly true. My brand new bicycle and touring traps are probably still lying where I left them in the hall of that devil-ridden chateau. Anybody who cares to collect them may keep them. The end. Yes, just a bit of casual racism there at the end. I completely forgot about that. But, yeah, not great. This is the grown-up version of the pale green pants with nobody inside them. That's exactly what it is, Andy. Yes, you're right. Perfect. It's great. It's also giving me slight kind of Beetlejuice vibes. Just like, get out of my house. I'm gonna spook you. Loved it. Never trust a coat again. Yeah, quite. But yes, I hope you enjoyed those 3 little stories. Yeah, they were fun. I also really like the ghost coat. Amazing. Yeah, I know. I thought it was really good. I really like the introduction of the guy. Just like, everybody says I'm a bit weird, but you know what? They're all stupid. So, and just because I wear glasses, leave me alone. Yeah, I quite like the protagonist of that one. Just like, why did I decide to go on a flippin' cycling trip? Ha! Very British. I need to fix my bike and I'll be damned if I'm going back out into the rain. Exactly, yeah. It's like, no, I'm going to fix my bicycle and I'm going to get there, but I just need a break. It's going to be fine. Yeah. Did enjoy. Yes, I like the protagonist of that one. And apparently, the author, that story is actually taken from a dream the author had. An actual dream he had about a possessed coat, which, nice. Good for him. He went on a cycling trip and... Did I pronounce that right? The Vosges? Can't choose a worse place for a cycling trip. You're kidding. Really? Like, that's a really bad place, is it? Oh dear. That's very entertaining. Silent S. Vosges. Yes. Oh, well, there we go. That's on his own head. One man on a bicycle. Yeah, a little bit, isn't it? Feels a bit Jerome K. Jerome. It's all very rocky, frail mountains of floods. Oh, great. Well, this guy's an idiot then. What a fool. I like the fact that he, at the end is just like, it's like, I took my brand new bicycle out there, and if anybody wants it, they can have it. It's fine. But yes, did enjoy. But yes, yeah, I hope you all enjoyed that. Sam might not be back this Saturday.
Not entirely sure what's happening this Saturday. You may get a stream from Sam, you may not get a stream from Sam. We shall see. Went outside, 0 out of 5 stars, do not recommend. Yeah, it's quite cold. It's a chilly one. At least he has more sense than many horror novel protagonists. Yeah, exactly. I just like the fact that it's like, make the sign of the cross and also hit it with a poker. It's like, I mean, just hit it with everything you got. Go for it, mate. So, yes, did quite enjoy that. It's like, I could do this, but why not? Yeah, cover all the bases, exactly. Give it a good whack on the head with a poker and also try and make the sign of the cross. Your cat Lucy is insisting on keeping the door open. Well, that was rude of her. How could she? Well, she's a cat. That's how she could. This was also... Oh, thank you very much for being here, Billiam. And thank you, all of you lovely people, for being here. It's always lovely to read stories for all of you delightful people. Shall we see who we've got to raid tonight? I would imagine that our good friend Stephen is probably on. Yeah, let's pop over to Stephen, who is back on Kerbal Space Program. Lovely. So I shall send you over to watch Stephen send Kerbals to space and hopefully not explode everything. But yes, may be back on Saturday, may not be back on Saturday, but I will certainly be back next Wednesday with more short stories of some description. So I shall see you then. But yeah, all of you have a lovely rest of your day, evening, week, and yeah, we shall see you again soon. Thank you and good night. Bye.